Hello and welcome to the Two Dudes Movie Podcast. This week we're going to be talking about something a bit different than movies. We're going to be talking about the brand new Marvel show to Disney Plus, Wandavision. So let's go. Theme music. Going to put this in here.
Please keep this in the recording. That'd be brilliant. You know, you say it's different to movies, but actually nowadays they're produced very similarly to movies now, and I think
they are.
It kind of shows. It
Yes.
was. I don't know about you. I found that was very good. Really, the first two episodes kept me engaged, got me thinking, okay, what's going to happen next?
Yes.
But
exactly.
Yeah, really good.
So we're going to talk about non-spoilers for a few minutes, a bit of pre-watch hype, what we were expecting, what we came out with, and then we're going to dive into spoilers and where we think this show is going.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
So we've had about 2 trailers for WandaVision. The show may or may not have been delayed due to the pandemic, but it was always coming around this time. So
I think the first time I heard about when it was coming out was it was announced for December to begin with, and you know, a month's not exactly bad, especially considering what's going on.
Yes. I think all that could have changed anyway, just to fit around the Mandalorian.
Yeah.
Because that wrapped up just a week before Christmas.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it, that it's coming on a Friday, the same way as Mandalorian always did. So it's obviously trying to grab the same audience.
All their Disney Plus shows, so everything they have uploaded to Disney Plus debuts on a Friday. So even if it's not new, all of it debuts on a Friday, which I believe is at odds. I think Netflix is a different day, but Netflix has a lot more content coming throughout the week.
You know, I never thought about it like that, because obviously they do it with movies that they try and, you know, release dates at different times. But I didn't think that the Disney Plus would have really much of an impact on it, but I suppose it might.
I wonder, in the same way I think Netflix has divulged a bit in terms of when content debuts, when Disney Plus starts ramping up, that they'll have to, because otherwise they're going to be having big tentpole shows all debuting in one night, even to the point where I think this year, looking ahead, we know we've got 4 more Marvel shows debuting this year, 5 more Marvel shows debuting this year, and 3 movies that potentially will also be going simultaneous to Disney Plus. Is there room to debut an episode of, say, Loki, and also Black Widow?
Well, I suppose it always depends on, like, because they've announced that just like WandaVision's I think they're only going to be about 8 episodes. They've announced
9 episodes.
9 episodes. So they've announced all the others will only be in and around 6 to 9. I think is the most. So I think really it all depends on release schedules, whether it's going to be delayed enough that, say, as you say, Loki might be out and finished before Black Widow even starts. So
I did a little calculation at when it was all announced, and we had dates for all the shows. I did a little calculation, and this was assuming WandaVision had 6 episodes, because that's what we thought they were all going to be. There was 48 new bits of content this year, which, if you put it weekly, means there's only actually 4 weeks of nothing, and we've already had 2 of those this year.
Yeah, true.
So I think there's going to definitely be overlap, and it will be interesting to see how they like pause Loki for a week to debut Black Widow, or would Black Widow debut a different day? I think that's going to to be.
Is that just including Marvel, or is that
that's
the Star
just
Wars
Marvel?
Oh well, yeah, because you got all the Star Wars stuff for that's coming out. I think Book of Boba Fett's at the end of the year, so yeah.
So that's going to be interesting. Anyway, back to WandaVision. So this show we know is about Wanda and Vision and them in sitcoms throughout decades. So we're looking at starting at the 50s, and we don't know how far we'll get, but I assume probably up to the 2000s.
Looking at the trailers, it does feel like we're getting that far, and then all of a sudden you see bits of, oh, okay, this is almost the real world now. Where are we, sort of thing. So
Yeah, and we know there's some sort of mystery involving Sword,
Yeah.
but I think this was an excellent piece of television, of content.
Yeah.
With the walls of sort of where content is drawn, the lines of it are drawn, movies, TV, YouTube, effectively, all this sort of stuff is just becoming stuff to watch as opposed
Yeah.
to how good quality is. You've got millions of streaming platforms, it seems, all producing, pumping out content week on week on week.
Yeah, the barrier between TV and film has certainly become less
Yeah,
and less, and I think this is very much. I mean, Mandalorian was one thing, and then this has definitely taken it to another level. I think I agree with you. I think it's a very good start. I think that's what it is. Definitely, it's just the start. They've done what they needed to in the first two episodes of keeping people engaged and making people
yeah.
go, okay, I want to come back next week.
I think what makes this different to me, and it's in my opinion, I think this is one of the best pieces of storytelling, full stop, best concept and ideas that we've seen in a while, specifically in relation to adapting and taking
Yeah,
source material and really running with it. And I think you could talk early MCU, Iron Man Avengers was influential in that was pretty original. No one had really done it like that
yeah,
before. And I think you could look at the way Nolan crafted his Batman trilogy. That hadn't really been done before. And I think this is an example that fits literally up there with the greats.
yeah. It's a turning point. I think I can completely understand why Disney and Marvel have kind of seen this and gone, all right, let's keep doing this. I think
Yes.
when all the slate was announced way back when, even not even the most recent one, back when She-Hulk and Moon Knight were first announced, everyone was kind of going, okay, why are you putting it on Disney Plus? Are you sure it's going to work? What if it all fails? And I think now, having watched these
proof
first
of concept.
these first two episodes, I go, oh, if they've seen this a while ago, it all makes sense now. It all completely makes sense as to why they've gone, we're going to keep doing this, because Mandalorian was a success and then this was a success. It just shows that obviously somewhere someone in Disney has got this cracked.
Well, I think this is an excellent starting point. And so Falcon and the Winter Soldier has not interested me as much. There's still hype, but it just to me looks like Winter Soldier 2, that sort of world that they're in.
Yeah.
Whereas with this, obviously, this is something brand new that we've not seen before, and I think it is a great. It's just a great advert for making Marvel about TV, because that's the show.
Yeah, and I think in many ways it almost. I think, just to pass a bit of credit, I think it was started very much with the Netflix shows. I think Daredevil very much kind of made people sit up and think, oh, this might work on the small screen.
High quality comic book television.
And I think, obviously, Iron Fist had a lot of negativity around it, and I think, obviously, then what happened with Netflix, obviously, with Disney Plus coming into the foray, I think it was bound to happen, but I think it gave Marvel this, okay, there's obviously an audience for this, and maybe we can try something new with it and push it that little bit further. We've gone Daredevil and stuff like that, and they liked that. Let's see if we can go a bit further with the MCU into it. I agree with you in saying I think Falcon and the Winter Soldier is a bit less hype, I'd say, just because it's less different. It does feel like in many ways they've gone, I don't know if this will sell on the big screen. Let's just make it a series first and then see if it will work. Whereas all the other Disney Plus shows, I think, like She-Hulk and Moon Knight, and especially like Miss Marvel, having seen this, I'm fully on board going, this is going to be really interesting how they play this now.
Yeah, I think going along that line, one thing that is super important in this, so Kevin Feige, the mastermind of the MCU, is a producer and is the sole producer on every main non-Sony MCU film. He's the only producer name on everything from Iron Man to Endgame. And I think what's actually quite interesting for the Disney Plus shows that we know of so far, and has been proven with WandaVision, is he's on as an executive producer. So he's taken a step back, and I think credit really needs to go to the showrunner Jack Schaefer
Yeah.
For being clearly a lot more involved in this than potentially some of the writers and directors are, where on the movies that Feige is producing.
Yeah.
She's clearly taken this idea, which I assume was given,
Mm.
because of course it still has to fit in the MCU. She was given a brief, but she's taken it and ran with it and really produced something that could have been weak and cheesy
Yeah.
and lazy, and it has so much depth
Mm.
and complexity that I think these first two episodes are a great pilot, effectively. A great,
Yeah.
this is what we want to achieve in this whole series, and I cannot wait for this series to start running.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I think at the moment it's very much walking. It's a slower pace. The short run times and stuff obviously show that. But even though it is a slower pace, I remember I was sat there watching it going, "Oh, there's a little nuance there. That's interesting." And something's okay. Something's a bit different here. And I think sowing those seeds, they've done that perfectly. As like a screenwriter, you try and steer your audience in the right direction of being able to see what you're planning further down the line, especially in a TV
you've got
series.
To plant the clues.
Yeah, you don't want it to be a case of, in episode 3 when they sort of start getting running, you go, oh, where did this come from?
Yes.
You need it to be a case of, you start sowing the seeds at the start of episode 1 or episode 2, and you take that audience with you rather than going. I think because of the nature of the decades that they were like wanting to go with and the way that they were wanting to show this from what we saw in the trailers, I feared it was going to be very much a separate episode by separate episode.
Yeah.
I feared very much that it was going to be almost like a day in a life and there wasn't going to be much of a connection. And I mean, we'll get onto it a lot more later when we get into spoilers, but they completely got rid of that worry that was in my head by the start of the end of the start of second episode. I was like, okay, this is really interesting.
I think the way they've crafted it, they've put a lot of thought into how to get this concept to work. And I think one thing that a lot of people have been worried about, the 20-minute run times, 25-minute run times, is a worry that fades into non-existence as if it was never there. Having seen that first episode, I think we've become, as a TV movie watching audience, we've become greedy and expecting all our shows to be this 40-minute, 1 hour mini movie when you have these high production values. And I think, to be fair, that will serve shows, and that's the expectation that shows like Falcon and the Winter Soldier and Loki will follow that path.
Maybe,
but I think here they made a bold choice to make them only 20 minutes, stick to it, and I think they will stick to it based on what we've seen so far.
It's interesting because obviously I watched religiously. I watched The Mandalorian the past 2 seasons, and going into the second season, I was thinking, okay, was it just in the first season they wanted to make sure they didn't fluff anything, they didn't put any filler in there, and so they wanted to make sure that all the episodes only included what was necessary, which is why each episode was a completely different runtime. When we see it here with WandaVision as well, we thought going into the second season, okay, they're going to change this because they know how it works, they know people want more. At the end of each episode, it doesn't matter how long it is, you're constantly sat there going, but I want the next one. And I think binge watching, I think Netflix has done this to us, a lot of people as well, is binge watching has become very much second nature to people. Yeah. And I think to Mandalorian's credit, and I think what will work in WandaVision's credit as well, is that it leaves you constantly going, okay, I can't wait for the next one. And, it spawns so many ideas and thoughts about what might work in the next episode, what could happen next. And although that can work to the detriment, I think the MCU has definitely thrived off of people coming up with their own ideas and expecting what might be next and thinking, oh, what could happen next? Because it gets people to then watch to see if their own ideas has, happen. If you don't have that, people they don't care. And I think that, WandaVision has with us, but I think with a lot of people will make people go, all right, I want to watch the next episode to see what happens.
I think so. The difference with me here and The Mandalorian per se is while this is a short runtime, they are short. I think it was a decision that they couldn't get away from, and they kept coming back to what this show is and what it's about, and feeling that 20-minute runtime, 25 minutes, is the only way to produce it. And having seen it, I would agree that if you make this a 45-minute show, you lose so much of what they managed to build, that the universe that they've built, because you're invested, because everything from the fact it's in black and white, lots of other things we won't get into in non-spoilers, but to the runtime, they all put you in this world, and you're fully invested. And when it comes to the end of that 20 minutes, you're not like, well, where's the rest of the episode? You're like, okay, that's one episode done. I think binging might have served this show well. I think especially based on what you get in these first 2 episodes, there is no Mandalorian opener style twist. A lot of what you see in the first 2 episodes, we knew was going to happen.
Yeah.
We've seen a lot of black and white footage.
Yeah.
So we knew a lot of the direction it was going in. But I think the weekly release will serve them better when this show again starts to run, when it really starts to get into it. And we've seen so little compared to like a movie, compared to what you've seen of a movie, which is a 2-hour runtime. With a couple of trailers. We've seen a couple of trailers for a 9-episode show. And I'm very interested to see if they have kept some things completely under their hats.
Well,
and
I think,
just like The Mandalorian did, I have a feeling that there's going to be maybe the next episode just something, a huge part of the show that's just completely been neglected from marketing.
Well, I think, I mean, 2 things. So obviously Marvel are very good at doing that anyway. We saw with Endgame that they managed to, and Infinity War, they edited shots to make it look like certain things were happening, and then we found out afterwards they weren't, and stuff like that. So Marvel are very good at doing that, and so I fully expect that there'll be things that we don't foresee coming, or that we have foreseen coming that don't happen the way we think they are. And I think one of those things as well is that I think Paul Bettany came out recently and said that there's a character that will appear that no one expects.
Yeah,
and it makes.
And I think
when people
he
expecting
made the
people
point
like
no
Quicksilver, when people have sort of already said, well, Quicksilver might be in it, and that they've Mephisto. They've had all these theories of who might turn up. It makes you go, if we're expecting these people, who in the world is going to turn up that we don't expect? Like, who could they bring out? But anyway, I really liked it. I thought it was really good. I was apprehensive, but still had the hype behind me, so I'm glad it lived up to my expectations. So
I think the other thing I think this show does, I think this is a fantastic entrance point to Marvel for someone who doesn't like Marvel. I think if you're a sort of I like comedy shows person, I would genuinely recommend just sticking on one episode of this and seeing if you want to know what's happening, because I think you will. I think this is an excellently seeded mystery so far, and we knew a lot of the setup and the premise of this, but we just don't know where it's going. And I think that's where this show isn't willing to give us anything until it needs to. It wants you to wait. It wants you to be patient. You have to be patient. There is not a lot going on so far, but the seeds are there, which we're going to get onto right now.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I think that perfectly leads us on to spoilers. So people who are listening, please, this is spoilers. If you don't want to know spoilers, just turn off right now.
Turn off, go and watch the episodes, and then come straight back. You'll be back in half an hour.
Yeah, probably.
If they're not long.
Well, no, it'll be an hour if you want to watch both.
So
for me, in terms of those little seeds, they were probably my favourite parts of the episodes. So those little hints, those little things aren't quite right here, were really interesting. I think they could have very easily played it off in the first episode, especially when they were just talking about, wedding rings and stuff like that. They could have very easily just put that in, and no one would have cared. And the fact that they didn't, and then they had to make a Oh yeah, no, I suppose you're right. You know, do you want to make these for us?
Yep.
First of all, Wanda's powers have tripled, but like it's just really interesting how
Hmm.
all of a sudden you just sort of you're watching this. You know, it could just be a comedy show because first of all, Paul Bettany's comedy timing I'd never thought was that good, and then you just sort of go, things aren't quite right here, and that's
Yeah. So
interesting.
before we get into all the theories and thoughts and hopes and dreams that this show will live up to, I think this show is built on the back of Wanda and Vision. And I've seen a lot of talk about how little we really have actually seen of any MCU character. And that this, maybe not the main three, so Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, but to any other supporting character, they haven't been seen. They haven't had any real plot. And I think with this and a Black Widow movie, I think this really steps up what the supporting characters are going to bring to the MCU
Yeah.
in a way that the lead characters are then going to fall behind in. Because yes, we spent time in Iron Man's world and Iron Man's home, but we're now getting 9 episodes inside Wanda and Vision's world.
Yeah.
So, which isn't going to be saddled with anything else. It gets to tell its own story independently, just like Falcon and the Winter Soldier will, just like Loki will. And we're going to really, I think these are already popular characters, but I think you're going to start to see a shift in the way you have your main MCU characters and your lower MCU characters, because they are phenomenal in this show.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany,
Yeah.
beyond. I think this is probably some of the best performances we've seen in the MCU.
Oh yeah, no, I completely agree, and I think it's. I'm really pleased that they get in their time. I think a lot of people have always known that Elizabeth Olsen was a very good actress, should say. For me, I I remember watching Wimbledon, which Paul Bettany was in when I was a kid, and going, this guy's great, sort of thing. So seeing him get his limelight, obviously he had it as Jarvis, which was really quite cool. But seeing those two being able to just act, and I think that was the thing, is that the MCU is ridiculous, it's crazy, it's surreal, and I think the point in this show is taking that surrealism and putting it in a surreal background, and you go, something's weird here, but they just get to act as other actors have in many ways in the past, and I think, especially in that 50s episode, the craft in both episodes actually was incredible. The use of the special effects in the timely fashion sort of thing was just mesmerising to watch, because I was watching it going, they've managed to make this thing, which does look cheesy, don't get me wrong, but is supposed to look cheesy, and make it good. Like, you could very easily naff that and it wouldn't work.
To speak to their acting, there is one moment at the end of the first episode that sticks out in my mind, and it is a moment, and it is not obvious, but when the camera begins to pan into them and they turn up just after they've done the wedding rings, they turn to the camera and they do a big glowing big smile. Before they do the smile, there is a moment they look dead-eyed into the camera. Vision's mouth is like flitting as if it's trying to smile but can't. Wanda just looks dead. And it's it's a brief second and a half. But you just see into that, and I think that to me was the biggest moment. There's loads of stuff that happened in the first episode, but that was the biggest moment of things are really not good.
And they amped it up in the second episode, because I mean we'll get into what actually happens in the second episode a bit later, I suppose, because we want to talk about the first one first. But just as they go outside at the end of that episode, you just almost get that this is actually them now. Like, they've been playing characters up until this point, and then oh no, there's a sudden shift in the mood, the atmosphere, and their mannerisms, and you go, okay, this is interesting. And honestly, they've, as I said in the non-spoiler bit, they've set this up so perfectly, because they haven't gone in too hard, they haven't gone in too soft. They've found that perfect, like, Goldilocks zone, and I want more.
I think the best way I can describe it is episode 1, they're sitting. That's it. Episode 2 is when the show begins to walk. and at the end maybe steps into a jog. But I think either 3 or 4 is where this show's going to run, and it will not stop. And I do think that possibly episodes 8 and 9 we've seen nothing from. I think there's that much stuff that's not, and I'm also hoping that the run times are going to grow, just like we've seen from episode 1 to 2, and potentially end up with a 40-minute finale.
Yeah.
Well, there's the greed coming back.
Yeah, I think it will in many ways because, so just for those who are listening, that I don't know why you wouldn't have watched it by this point, but
because it's amazing.
They spend the first episode in the 50s and then the second episode in the 60s, and obviously the opening credits reflect that. That's brilliant, but I think the runtimes do as well. I think the runtime in the 20s the runtime is in the 20s in the 50s, and I think that kind of reflects the time period that it's trying to depict, and then it gets a bit longer in the 60s when people maybe were a bit more willing to sit down and watch TV.
I am not an expert on 50s and 60s television.
No.
But I do appreciate, and you touched on it earlier, the visual effects. I can see the craftsmanship, the time, the care that has gone into painstakingly, I can only presume, taking concepts and ideas across these eras and building them into what feels like a Marvel 50s sitcom.
Yeah.
There's no other way of describing it. This is exactly, if I travel back to the 50s and you told me there was a Scarlet Witch TV show, that is the show I would expect to be watching. If I'm in the 60s, that is the show.
Down to the corny humour and...
all the dumb jokes, all the horrendously cheesy visual effects, even down to the stories themselves, just being to modern times so nonsensical, so ludicrous. This woman's gonna faint because she hasn't had dinner. The husband's getting angry because his wife is fainting because she hasn't had dinner. You can imagine going into someone's house, but that's the sort of content that was from these times.
But onto that scene especially, and that just whole bit about them sort of like having dinner. I just want to sort of say, I think that was the moment I went, okay, they're not going to try and stick with the sitcom at all points, because that in many ways, I mean, choking is a triggering thing for a lot of people. I think for many ways that's when it went into what we expected almost from Wandavision, of almost horror and suspense and
the creepiness.
Creepiness. And I think that was when I went, they're not messing around here. They're not.
Okay, let's take from the top. So one thing that we knew about vaguely, potentially, but I'm sure lots of people who watch this won't, is there are title sequences.
Yes.
Like a musical opening, which have been written by Robert and Christian Anderson Lopez of Frozen fame.
Gosh.
They've stepped over the Disney lot and have come to write
Disney
these
is so inbred, it's hilarious.
They are, in my opinion, absolute nothings, but I think do what they need to get you into that mindset.
Exactly.
They're not masterpieces. You're not going to be putting that on your Spotify playlist, but
they might do.
They do what they need to do, which is sell you that 50s, 60s world. And I think already knowing that it's going to be set there, I think some people might have expected that we were going to see them go into it and they'd save that from the trailers. We were going to see some starting point. Because the last we saw Wanda was Endgame. She's kicking Thanos' butt. And now they're in this. But I like the fact that they used this to establish, no, you're here.
Yeah.
You are in this. This is it. We're not going to be nipping out.
And of course, the most, I think the interesting bit about it as well is that these opening credits are in story. Like they're opening credits for WandaVision, which is not just something that we're watching, but it's something that is actually happening. And so like the cast list for him is always Wanda Maximoff and Vision, and so all of a sudden you're like, okay, so this is actually in story as well. So and we find out by the end of the first episode that these are actual TV episodes, so to speak. that are
Yes.
playing on someone's set
Screen. Yeah.
screen somewhere that we'll get into properly in a bit. But it's just interesting, isn't it, that they've decided rather than just sort of like having it as the
Rather than it
TV
being
show
Wanda's
itself.
head,
Yeah,
this is something that can be accessed from the outside.
yeah.
One of the other things that I think again puts you in that aspect ratio, super simple.
Mm.
And I would like to speak again to give credit where credit is due. So I went back because this was annoying me, and the trailers, and this might be something that just comes into play later. But the way the trailer the trailer editors have made these trailers is, I think, a craft in itself. In terms of the way that you see the episodes take place. Take that dinner scene as a great example. The way you see it presented in the trailer is not the same. And mainly because one of my favourite things in the trailer was when the aspect ratio in that scene, just as he starts freaking out and everything starts glitching, you see the aspect ratio grow and fill your screen. And I thought that was gonna be incorporated into the show in a cool way, so it would, as weird things happened, the aspect ratio would change and the world would get slightly bigger, slightly clearer. It didn't, but I don't think it matters. I don't think that makes the show bad. I just think the fact that the trailer editors were able to capture the essence of the show in so many different ways, in the glitching that we haven't again seen in the show, in that aspect ratio. There's a scene, the beekeeper at the end appears in the trailer in colour and then flashes to black and white.
Oh, he does, doesn't he? Yeah.
He does, and then flashes to black and white, and then you see black and white Wanda and Vision. And again, they've clearly had access to all this footage and have just been able to run with it. And I think they've done an exceptional job of setting the tone, setting the mood. Because there's a lot of times trailers come out nowadays and they just don't quite fit with a movie. You feel like the trailer was better than the movie.
Yeah.
The trailer editors really should get paid more. Whereas in this, I feel like the trailer, they did a phenomenal job of capturing the essence of a show without having to just take snippets of a woman using a door knocker as a lobster and watching Wanda just stare. They edited bits together to create that, and the music and everything exceptional.
But on that sort of like dinner scene especially, you just kind of reminded me of something. One of the things they do that I think only people who know film or know filming techniques will kind of catch on to is they change the way that they film things as soon as things start going wrong. So, of course, in the first episode in the 50s, they're doing mostly end-on filming.
It's like in front of a studio audience.
Yeah. And then, as things start going wrong in that dinner scene, you get the close-ups for the first time. And, you get the Dutch tilts and you get things like that, the sort of more modern filming techniques. And you go, okay, again, reality's starting to slip through. And I think onto the sort of like on the trailer sort of side of things, Marvel have always been very good at it. Obviously, as I said earlier, we saw it with Endgame and stuff, but one of the things that they haven't always got right is this showing everything.
Yeah.
You could not from Endgame or anything like that especially, but in a lot of movies you can practically watch the trailer and go, I know exactly what's going to happen.
Yes.
Not at all with this. I didn't know anything going in, really. When I watched it, I went, oh, well, that's all my ideas gone completely.
I think all the trailer shows is there's two different trailers and they both just show the premise in a different way.
Yeah.
You can argue that's a spoiler. I don't really think it is. But I think just the premise of them being in TV is what is, and that something is wrong is what's shown in the trailers. And both trailers do the exact same. There's extra shots and extra scenes, but there's no extra information given. You're not given anything more than clues to what's maybe happening. You're still just told movies or TV shows something wrong. And I think that is, again, to their credit. I think everyone who created this show should just be hired for everything they ever want to be.
Yeah.
Because...
Well, they work for Disney, so they'll be going over to, I don't know, other things, Star Wars and stuff. Kevin Feige's already going over there at some point, Patty Jenkins and stuff, so...
To move away from the episode specifically, one thing that I've been worried about with these Disney Plus shows, And what's worried me about, not worried me about Mandalorian. So the Mandalorian is a series that goes, you've got series 1, series 2, series 3. And with these Marvel shows, I've hoped and prayed that they would not follow that formula, because I'm the kind of person that hates nowadays, especially when they go Black Panther 2. I want a subtitle. And I've been hoping, and I think it's pretty clear at this point, Wandavision is a one-time thing. They're not doing season 2. But I would have hoped things like Loki, potentially, which we've heard is getting a season 2, would have been Loki, whatever the subtitle is, and then season 2 has another subtitle. I don't just want Loki season 1, Loki season 2.
I honestly have a feeling, because of the way that Marvel is, especially with the movies, I feel like they're definitely interim things. And so you can't really... I have a feeling... Maybe Loki's the only one that might not be, because it's more episodical in a way that it's stories. I feel like Falcon and the Winter Soldier especially, maybe not She-Hulk and maybe not Moon Knight and Miss Marvel, but definitely WandaVision. This is just it. I have a feeling we're getting one series and then they're going to go back into the films, and it's just to tell that interim story of what they're in up to and set up whatever's next.
The stories with more depth.
I do agree with you. I think certain things, Mandalorian I think works with as you say, the same as like what I'm saying about Loki, is that if it's a story that just keeps going because it's just stories about a person, then season 1, season 2 makes sense. But if you've got just a specific, like WandaVision wouldn't work as a season 2, because what is she going back into whatever we're in at the moment? Or she come out for Doctor Strange and then goes back into... It doesn't make sense. So it just makes... Yeah, I agree with you in that. Shall we move on to the more nuanced bits that we want to really talk about?
Yeah. I think because we don't have an understanding of the 50s and 60s sitcoms in that way, we enjoyed the episodes. They were fun and good, but there's not much more commentary we can give to it being in black and white. And that I think one thing, to be fair, that was really clever is the integration of their powers. And I was a bit worried that we wouldn't see them use their powers, and it was going to be just going to be Wanda and Vision as people. And I know we saw bits in the trailers, but I was worried it was going to be very minimal. But they have gone to town. They have not skimped. They've not cut. They've put everything in. And the production design, I've watched a behind-the-scenes featurette, and you see some of the black and white scenes in colour. It's just exceptional, the level of detail, the fact they filmed this in front of a studio audience.
God, those NDAs must be airtight.
Exactly. It just goes so much into it. One thing I did find really funny watching the behind the scenes of them doing the studio audience, this show is funny, but it's not laugh out loud crease funny, and the people in this audience are laughing like they've never laughed before, and I'm just like, is a lobster door knocker that funny?
Well, I have a feeling they were probably directed to a degree. They were probably told, we need you to laugh really loudly, because that's what they're doing the time.
I just don't know where you found those people. I did notice that on the front, it did seem to be... You'd expect it to be more like younger people, but it did seem to be older people, so I don't know if they...
I wouldn't be surprised if the live studio audience is people who work on set anyway.
Yeah, it's probably like friends, family, that sort of thing. That's the only way you'd keep those NDAs tight.
Yeah, but I loved the... Yeah, it's true. You already work for them. You can get fired. That's certainly one way to threaten someone with NDAs and stuff. But no, yeah, one of the things, just before we move on, is one of the things I do want to pick up on, actually, is the use of colour at points. Especially, obviously, not in the first episode. In the second episode, they have the helicopter, which is strange, and then they have the blood from the glass. And the use of colour there is bright, stark red, and I'm like, oh, that's an interesting touch. And it's a brilliant film. Like, to be able to isolate those colours, I mean, these guys will find it easy because of how experienced they are, but it's not an easy task to do.
They make people fly.
Yeah.
I don't think they're worried about making it colourful.
It's brilliant how they've done that. Right.
Yeah. Okay, so let's take a little sidestep and let's head into what we think is going on.
Yeah.
There is one thing I want to start with, because we didn't actually mention it yet, and I think this will segue us in quite nicely.
Yeah.
There were commercials. There were in-universe, in-context commercials
Yeah.
in the middle of each episode, and I hope that continues.
Now, let me just say, when it faded to black, I was like, oh, okay, this is an interesting transition. And then as soon as it came up with the thing, I was like, oh, that's good. That's very good. I'm really pleased they've done that. And of course, obviously the first one is the Stark toaster, isn't it?
Yes.
And I didn't know what it'd be. I didn't know if it'd actually be anything particular in universe. And then as soon as he started up the toaster, I heard the repulsor sound and went, okay, that's interesting. Is this something? And of course, they released it afterwards. It was Stark Industries. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Obviously, the second being Strucker was mind-blowing.
Yeah. So one thing that was interesting about the commercials was the actors were the same both times. It was the same man and the same woman. So I hope that continues. Now, this is something I'm quite proud to have noticed, because I've watched a few videos and seen a couple of articles of what Easter eggs, and I've not seen this yet.
Right.
So there's a lot of theories about we've seen basically Stark Industries, Hydra, and Sword, and they're the only real things we know of in the universe that have been
released,
literally written in to the episodes. And a lot of people have been guessing, well, how are Hydra involved in what's happening to Wanda right now? But I don't think Hydra involved necessarily at all, and I don't think the clues we've had so far that they are. The Stark Industries toaster is the bomb that Wanda sees when they say, her and Quicksilver say, she waited for Stark to kill us. There was a bomb, an unexploded bomb that they thought was going to blow them up. And the toaster is a bomb. I was so confused at first when it happened. I was like, why is this toaster just beeping? It
definitely sounded like a bomb.
But that's the bomb
maybe
that was going to kill Scarlet Witch. Wait. And then the watch, the Baron Strucker watch, who watched her grow up and gave her the powers.
Well, that's the thing. Maybe.
Go on.
I'm just thinking maybe the through line might be here. So I've got a wild theory, and I've got this could be an interesting theory. Maybe the through line is that story. Maybe the next one we get is the next part of the story. So it started with with Stark, and then it went to Strucker, and maybe then the next one is either Quicksilver or Ultron or Avengers related, and then we go into Vision, sort of like, and it tells that story up until now. It tells
the story of Wanda.
Now, my wild theory: what if those two people who are always in the adverts were? 'Cause I'm not saying they're still alive. Her parents.
Maybe.
Because it's interesting as the same person. It's interesting how it started with the bomb.
But what even more potentially? What if those? So we saw in Captain Marvel the Skrulls extracting her memories. What if? And we saw when Ben Mendelsohn was doing that. Talos was doing that. We saw him appear in the memories. It all heard his voice in the memories. What if these commercials are them meddling in Wanda's memory, and it has been layered. The memory she can't fully access. She's seeing it as a Stark Industries toaster commercial.
Yeah.
But I think I'm committed to the idea this is about her history.
Yeah.
Because it's such an odd choice for a toaster, but as soon as you put them, and specifically in that order, the Stark toaster, then I think the only two things we know about her history.
Yeah.
It makes so much sense. Who those people are, I think, is definitely important.
Well, I think who those people are brings me on to another thing that actually my other half mentioned to me, and I didn't think about this, and actually when she brought it up, it made sense, is that we see in episode 1 that there's a lot less people who are featured. I think that's obviously a thing of the time rather than more than anything else, but in the second episode there's a lot more people. Now, what she said to me was, what if the reason why there are more people, and actually all the people who are there are people who are trying to get through to her? So we already know that Monica Rambeau, the character who appears in episode 2, is there to try and help Wanda. She's that was released in the trailers and interviews and stuff beforehand. What if all of them are? All these people are there to try and help her. And I think that links to the choking scene, because I think maybe what might have been happening there is those two people who were there were the almost first responders, maybe, to whatever might be happening. Or maybe even just the first two people who were looking after her. And the woman is constantly telling her to stop it, because I have a feeling she is using her powers in this state, in reality, whatever she ends up is, to actually choke the male. And I think that's probably maybe why you have all these people. Maybe that's who all these people are.
See, I think different.
Okay.
So there's one thing which ties to what I was saying about the commercials, which is I think everything we're seeing, there are lots of metaphors, basically, that we do not understand. I don't think things are being presented as they're happening. I think lots of things are being put through a lens, just as we see Wanda is and Vision is. They're put through the lens of this universe to make sense of it, be about the toaster, be about the watch. Yeah. And I think one other example of this is we see at the end of episode 2, coming out of a drain, a beekeeper surrounded by bees. Yeah. Now, initially, a lot of people have jumped to maybe it's a villain, a comic book villain who's about bees, something like that. I'm sure there is one. But if you take it as everything has to fit in the 50s or the 60s at that point, what does a beekeeper suit look like? And it looks like a hazmat suit.
That's interesting.
And I think there are people entering. I think we know for a fact that Monica Rambeau, or what's her name, Gwendolyn? Is it Gwendolyn in the
Gwendolyn in the show, yeah, at the moment, yeah.
She's a sword agent, so she has entered. Yeah. We also know there's something going on with Agnes, the name.
Yeah.
And where was I going with this? But what if that beekeeper? What if these are the people entering? We see them enter, the people that force their way into.
Yeah. Well, she says no, doesn't she? Life. So obviously, I have a there's a reason why I think it is towards a villain or antagonist sort of character, is because of the fact she says no. I have a feeling that a lot of this is maybe I think it is through the lens to make sense, but I think it's to make sense for her, because I think this is all a defense mechanism. I do think this is all a defense mechanism for her. Or maybe sort of have induced her into it, but I feel like it's definitely.
Go on.
I was going to say it's definitely some form of her trying to combat something. Which is why I think the beekeeper was whatever she's trying to combat seeping through. And she obviously is fighting off with her powers, but yeah.
So I'm pretty confident Sword is not doing this to her. We hear over the radio who's doing this to you.
That's true.
We know someone is. I think let's take a walk down hypothetical lane. Wanda, after killing Thanos, doing the badass stuff, goes, I want to get away. I want to go live in suburbia.
Yep.
She is clearly a weapon of mass destruction.
Yeah.
And I think people would be keeping tabs on her, whether that was Sword already or whether this was just someone else waiting in the wings. And I think whoever that is, and we've got some theories on that in a bit, I know.
Yep.
She is in suburbia. Maybe she is watching television, watching that sort of thing, falls asleep, and this is something being done to her while she's asleep.
Yeah.
But she's now awake in terms of she's doing the things she's doing in the episodes, but the people in the town are the people who lived in this town, but they've been pulled in, and we see in the trailer
she's just literally shifted reality.
Field. So this is actually the real world, but she's just changed it to suit herself. Because,
well, that would be really interesting, because obviously she has got reality bending powers. I assumed that it wasn't because of the monitor that we see at the end of the first episode, but that could still be external
into the force field. Yeah. They're seeing it could be outputting a signal for sci-fi argument's sake.
Yeah.
And that's the signal it's outputting. It's
That's
outputting
interesting.
this TV signal, which I guess could take us on to the multiverse trilogy.
Trilogy. Okay, what's the third one?
So we know, because of the recent interviews with Feige, Wandavision,
Yep.
Spider-Man,
Oh, Spider-Man.
and Doctor Strange
Yeah.
are one through story.
Yep.
I think it will be interesting to see with Spider-Man in the middle
Yeah.
how much it really relates, if that makes sense, how much it really ties in.
Yeah.
But I think the important fact is about its ties to Multiverse of Madness, because we know initially that Scott Derrickson was directing, and he made several comments in relation to making a Doctor Strange movie that he likes the villain Nightmare, which fit with at least everything I'm thinking is happening, and would
100%.
make sense
Yeah.
to potentially have a similar reality-bending character to Wanda, being able to morph her mind, and then, but her powers being as powerful as we know they are, take full control, and even take over even what he's trying to do. So he's done something, but then it's got even worse.
Yeah, and I think in terms of how the trilogy fits into that, I think Spider-Man will just be a kind of
Multiverse
aftermath.
middle ground.
Yeah, it will just be kind of like this has happened and Spider-Man's caught in the middle. And I don't
Spider-Man's before Doctor Strange.
Yeah, so I think it will just be a case of WandaVision, whatever happens at the end of WandaVision will happen, and it will create this multiverse rift, whatever it ends up being, or anything like that. And so Spider-Man will just almost be playing in that. And that's why you've got all these different characters from the different versions of it. I'm pleased Sam Raimi's on board for Doctor Strange, because I think he's probably going to be able to play off of what then happens in Spider-Man, but I have a feeling it's more of a case of kind of like what we've seen in Homecoming and Far From Home. It's Spider-Man's own little story based in a world that inhabits the MCU.
That makes sense.
And then I have a feeling that from what we've seen, Nightmare is probably the only villain I can think of that WandaVision makes sense for. And that's down to bees being a big fear for a lot of people. And also, I have a feeling that it's because of the fact that, for me, Wanda's fear has always been the fact that she doesn't fit in.
Yeah.
And so, and the theme of the first two episodes especially was fitting in. It's being trying to fit in. And honestly, to delve a little bit into what I feel like the end goal will be, just because I have a feeling if they don't include it, it will be a bit of a missed opportunity. The only way that Wanda can ever fit in is if there are more people like her.
Yes, so this ties into something I was going to bring up in relation to the purpose of driving Wanda mad like this, and there are a lot, and there's a significant amount of references to children and having children, and we talk about Wanda fitting in, and the moment she wins the talent show, they feel like they fit in, they go home, and then she's pregnant. As soon as she feels like she fits in,
something happens.
Something happens to her in her consciousness, and this thing that's clearly being forced in suddenly takes root because she now feels at home in this world.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen, again, comments of this in the trailer, that they need to fight for their home. This is the thing that ties her into staying, because she's now got children. If she leaves, what happens to them?
Well, that's the question I have for you, because I always asked it, and I want to know your opinion on it. I was asked, are these kids actually real?
And I think that all depends on the way in which they want to take the story.
Yeah.
We know Wanda's going to do something with a multiverse. We know this is based on House of M. where the line "No more mutants," one of the most famous lines in Marvel Comics, is uttered to wipe mutants from existence. Is this going to be a situation where she utters a line potentially on the opposite, where she creates mutants, creates people like her because her children have been taken off her, which could, rather than create them in this universe, open up a multiverse where she can access.
Yeah, here's the thing. So a little bit about Nightmare is the fact that Nightmare can't be killed. He is kind of like the Infinity Stones, is that he is intrinsic for life. To be able to, so in order to get, if you killed Nightmare, you get rid of Dreams, right?
Yeah.
And so I think the only way that Wanda can defeat Nightmare, if Nightmare's the villain, of course, but the only way that Wanda can defeat Nightmare is if she defeats her fear. Now, I don't think Wanda's the type of person who's going to face up to her fear and go, it's fine, I don't mind fitting in, because we saw that, well, one of her lines in Civil War was really, I can't control their fear, I can only control my own.
Yes.
And if she controls her fear, I have a feeling it's going to be a case of she wants to fit in. The only way she can control that is by seeing these proper, and we're really getting into it now, the proper reality-bending powers. It's no longer just, waving your hands and people fly over in places. She can now properly bend reality, is to create or to bring, maybe from other universes, as we see the multiverse thing, mutants to Earth. But I also feel like Monica Rambeau might get her powers from this event. So maybe it's a mix of both.
So, to segue into Monica Rambeau, we know that she's been put here by SWORD somehow, and we know that she gets ejected later.
Yeah.
I think it's important that it's important that they're the good guys.
Yeah.
Because I think that's when there's a turning point from we're trying to help you, Wanda, to Wanda, you need to stop. And that's why I think there's potentially other people trapped in this. This isn't just about her and being happy.
Yeah.
This is about other people who've been dragged in and dragged down.
Yeah.
We see the Soul Stone in the trailer. And everyone...
Was that Soul Stone, or was it the Mind Stone? I thought it was the Mind Stone.
Mind Stone, you're right. Yeah. We do know that every single mutant who exists in the MCU, anyone that has superpowers like that, including Captain Marvel, tends to get their powers from an Infinity Stone. So if Monica Rambeau is going to get her powers, it would make sense for it to come from an Infinity Stone.
Yeah.
And which would then allow us to know their place in the wider universe, because we don't know what happened to them.
Yeah, true. That's interesting. And I think it's good to point out that SWORD are the good guys. I think you're right in the fact that there may become a turning point of Wanda, you need to stop this, because I feel like the way it will go is Nightmare's currently controlling Wanda. Wanda will eventually become the all-powerful, unstoppable force. And I think that links to SWORD's first appearance was in an arc called Unstoppable. And then, of course, it went into Secret Invasion. Obviously, we know that's coming with Nick Fury. And obviously, we all believed that Nick Fury was, when we saw him at the end of Far From Home, that was SWORD. Yes, obviously, there's two parts of it.
So here's an interesting thing about SWORD compared to the comics. And this has been... because I don't think it's been made clear. I don't think we've seen a clear enough shot of a SWORD logo to see it in the show. But in the merchandise that they've released in relation to SWORD, in the comics, SWORD stands for Sentient World Observation and Response Department.
Yeah.
Which is to do with space, sentient world.
Well, that's what I was always thinking. Okay, but this is Earth-based, surely.
Because in WandaVision, in the MCU, SWORD stands for Sentient Weapon.
Oh.
Meaning, if you take to Civil War, the way
Ross
refers to them as weapons of mass destruction. You've got people like Wanda, Hulk, Thor. They are the sentient weapons, and I think in the wider MCU, We know that there is the Sokovia Accords that exist that don't allow superheroing to take place, but we don't
Yeah.
know what happened post
Post
Infinity
Endgame.
War,
Well,
really,
yeah.
as to what the sort of state of being superheroes was. So the sentient world observation and response department, that is their observation and response of these human or alien weapons on Earth, and that's sort of because we know there's no Avengers. We presume there's no Avengers because there's no Avengers movie slated anytime in the future. So what if the Avengers has been disbanded, but Sword exists in the place of Shield to observe, monitor, cooperate with these people? Because
Yeah.
all the people we know work at Sword at the moment. We know Jimmy Woo. We know Darcy.
Yeah.
And we know Monica. We know Monica's gonna have ties and has ties to Captain Marvel, so would support.
Yeah.
Jimmy is with Ant-Man, and we know he's now friends with him. And we
Yep.
know Darcy works with Thor, so we know all of the people who work at Sword aren't the Thunderbolt Ross enemies
Yeah.
of weapons. They're the friends of them.
Yeah.
So it would make sense that they're in support.
Yeah. Now, going on to sort of like, as you were saying earlier with source material and stuff like that, I think swords are also a really interesting one because currently, in the current run of comics, Magneto is a current member of Sword. And you've just mentioned then as well is that you reckon that the Avengers are disassembled. I do agree with you for the moment. Obviously, Kevin Feige has recently come out and said there will be another Avengers movie.
There will be. I just mean for
But
now.
House of
in the
M
universe. Yes.
came straight after the Avengers Disassemble storyline. So already there we've got, obviously, Sword has a lot to do with X-Men.
Yeah.
Sword, it's always been intrinsic with X-Men, and then you've got the House of M that came straight after Avengers Disassembled. I do think that Marvel has a very good way of, I think Age of Ultron may be the exception to this, but they've got a very good way of taking a source material and going, we're going to do what you expect, but also not what you expect. So I think those two being a big part of it might foretell that we're going to get the more mutants bit, or that it's going to come from the multiverse, and that we're going to get the maybe Magneto being part of Sword. I really think that'll be an interesting bit.
I think from what I see, I think this is the House of M. The House of M being the universe that Wanda creates
with no mutants, with no superpower people.
Yeah, I think this is the House of M in relation to the comics, at the end of which we will get that no more mutants, whatever the equivalent is, because there isn't mutants. So whether it is there are mutants. I don't know what they're going to do, because I think there has to be. It is so important. It's her most important part as a character. There will be a line. I'm committed.
Say that, but then they've not done Great Power, Great Responsibility with Spiderman.
But that's only because everyone's done it and everyone moans about it. That's the only reason it's not in it. It will be, and I also believe that Great Power, Great Responsibility will come.
Yeah.
And I think potentially, so there's been a lot of talk about multiverses.
Yeah.
And we've never seen Uncle Ben for Spider-Man.
Yeah.
What if Spider-Man meets his Uncle Ben in Spider-Man?
Multiverse madness.
Because you've never seen... Well, in whichever, but we've never seen that Uncle Ben.
I have a feeling if the rumours are true and Tobey Maguire comes back, I have a feeling Tobey Maguire will sacrifice himself and he will tell him the great power, great responsibility. And
someone's saying it. This is the end of a trilogy.
What I'm saying, he will become the Uncle Ben. Anyway, back onto Wandavision.
That's fine. He can be, but someone's going to say it. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I just think
relevant.
I just think it's very interesting how they seem to be using these source materials. I was very excited to see Sword as soon as I saw the logo. I was like, oh yeah, Sword, that's awesome. Because I don't think I picked up on it in the trailers that it was going to be Sword. For some reason, my brain just didn't go Sword.
Yeah.
And because I think I assumed Nick Fury was with Sword, so Sword was off-world. But of course, we're seeing that it's maybe not as we seemed.
Yes.
But yeah, in terms of what might happen at the end of this, there's a lot of talk of Wanda being the villain of Multiverse of Madness, or just being the thing that needs to be stopped. So maybe it gets too far out of control at the end of this. Maybe her bringing the mutants into play
Yeah.
causes this rift in the multiverse that Doctor Strange is just like, I have to fix this, and the only way I can is by trying to stop Wanda.
Also, the only explanation of anything to do with a multiverse we've had was from the Ancient One in Endgame.
Yeah.
We see her draw a line, and that if you pluck an Infinity Stone from a timeline, it will destroy that timeline, because basically you won't have a power to prevent the forces of evil.
Yeah.
Was the principle. I don't think it actually destroys it. I think it just leaves it to ruin.
Yeah.
Now, we know that Doctor Strange is all about the order of the world and protecting it from all these threats. What if Wanda, who is Infinity Stone powered, has the same effect if you pluck her from the universe? So if she is left from our multiverse, let's say call it Earth 1, she leaves Earth 1 to go in search of mutants or her children or Vision or whatever, it's Doctor Strange's mission to go and track her down and bring her back, because she needs to exist, because we know how powerful she is as an Avenger. She needs to be brought back to protect and potentially become a sorcerer supreme, or just a sorcerer, because we know she uses Doctor Strange magic.
Yeah.
It would make so much sense. And talking to the complications of this Multiverse of Madness movie and all the balls it's juggling, we also know Baron Mordo is back.
Yeah.
Who utters
no more sorcerers.
No more sorcerers.
Yeah.
Which I think, seeing now her coming to Doctor Strange, is much more important. And maybe that's the line.
Yeah.
Maybe they have already done it, because Wanda would then be needed to fight Baron Mordo, because she is a sorcerer. She's the most powerful sorcerer.
Yeah, because it's part of her rather than something she draws upon.
Yes. So I think there's a lot of balancing to do in that movie. I'm sure they've got it, but I'm very curious to see what Wanda does. But I think, and I just want to touch on this with one thing that we are seemingly in agreement of, because I think that Vision is done.
Oh.
I think Vision, I don't want him to be. I would love Vision to stick around, but I think Vision is done unless she finds him in multiverse. I think whatever happens at the end of this series will be the end for Vision.
Yeah,
and he might be found again.
It's interesting. I think he's definitely in his current form. He's definitely a defense mechanism. He was definitely created by Wanda, and he's definitely not real in a sense of, if say this reality was to end, Vision wouldn't be there. But here's the thing, and it goes back to what you said a bit earlier, and I think there's a precedent for people being Infinity Stones, or being as important as Infinity Stones. So in the latest, I believe it's Infinity Wars, storyline that came out a couple of years ago, I think it was, each of the Infinity Stones had a person who it belonged to, and they were almost the power of that Infinity Stone. Now, if we have it now that you've got the fact that Wanda is the Mind Stone, and then you've got the Tesseract is obviously Captain Marvel. The Soul Stone might be Adam Warlock. We never know if that's going to come into it, because they were very linked in the comics. And then obviously the Time Stone's Doctor Strange. Power Stone might be Peter Quill. We don't know. We don't know what's going to happen with the Guardians at the moment. But anyway, I have a feeling Vision comes into that, because just like the Mind Stone created Vision, Wanda might be able to do the same.
I don't think it is possible that they can both. So they've written themselves into a corner, in my opinion, because they made the Mind Stone, and I understand it's a thing they have because they both came from the same power. I think that idea would have made sense if the Mind Stone lived on as Vision. But if the Mind Stone is the power of Scarlet Witch, I don't necessarily think it makes sense to then also have things that. So, from our understanding in this universe, the Infinity Stones have been destroyed because Captain America took them
Yeah.
back. So I think it makes sense that Wanda is the remaining source of that power. She has all the power of
Yeah.
that. I don't know that Vision can be brought back in any permanent fashion without Wanda giving up her powers to do so, which could again be a potential choice she makes in Doctor Strange or at the end of this, where she gives up her power for Vision's existence, leaving the world powerless.
I get that.
Something like that.
And I think it would make sense if they did it that way. The rebuttal I have is the fact that in Infinity War, they were detaching the Mind Stone from Vision. So Vision can exist without the Mind Stone. All that was needed was the Mind Stone was what
originally
gave him the brain. You know, when Ultron puts that in his head, that maps the brain. And so that's why I have a feeling that Wanda could use her powers to do the similar thing. And so technically he can exist without the Mind Stone. But I do think as well they have written themselves into a corner, because to be able to explain that and make it make sense and not seem a bit...
Well, we never found what happened to Vision's body. So unless this is some part of her repairing the body.
Maybe.
Because all the stuff would hopefully potentially still be in there, and she just needs to, again, having the power of the Mind Stone, just needs to restore it to him. But I do think we've not heard anything about Vision appearing in any future thing. Yes, Marvel's good at keeping things on lock. But I think they either need to bring Vision back or they need to end him. And I think we'll know by the end of this series what's going to happen.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But I just think bringing him back weakens the sacrifice. I think it weakens... So this show has been incredibly romantic.
Yeah.
And just really built on that relationship and the love they genuinely and clearly have for each other.
Yeah.
And I think if you just bring him back, it questions...
Yeah.
Well, why don't you just do this in the first place? Why did you go mad?
I suppose the thing is, as well as the fact that if she had Vision, she probably wouldn't feel the need to have all the other mutants. The whole point in House of M is the fact that,
I guess,
you know, Magneto and Quicksilver and Vision all were apart from Wanda, and that caused her to have a massive breakdown. If one of them were there, you know, Wanda is an incredibly tragic character in this MCU, and I think that's what's led her down this road of having this breakdown. And I think at the end of it, the only true way to give her the push over the edge would be to remove Vision.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden she's got no one, and she's in this place and she's in a hellscape because she's being tormented, and she needs to get out of it, and that'll push her over the edge. And so I think you're right in the fact that it would make sense story wise, and it would make sense, I think, satisfaction wise for the audience if Vision wasn't around.
Yes. I think we can both agree WandaVision has launched itself exceptionally well into a walking pace, but has a lot of room to grow, and I think we're both incredibly excited to see where it's going.
Yeah, 100%. Can't wait for Friday.
So we may be back next week to talk some more about WandaVision. Otherwise, we will see you next time. We've been the two dudes. See you later.
See you soon.